Hello again, it's Scott here, and we are going to talk about character creation in EVE Online. As I previously mentioned, what you do in the character creator really doesn't have such a long-term effect on the game, but there's a few things you might want to know, specifically in regard to information you may have read elsewhere, which is perhaps wrong or simply out of date. So in the first screen, you're basically getting to pick which of the four races you want to be: the CALDARI, the GALLENTE, the AMARRs, or the Minmatar. And here's where I take a moment to dispel my first myth about character creation in EVE. If you go online and Google EVE character creation, you'll get a whole bunch of articles which will tell you that you really want to pick a CALDARI Achura monk because they are the best. Specifically because they have the lowest charisma, which means their attributes and the other stats are much better. Now, that was certainly true in older versions of the game, but that has long since ceased to be the case. Everyone starts out with the same set of skills and can later on choose to change those if they want. But the message hasn't got out, and many people still make these characters having done some research on the internet. This was especially unfortunate because until the new character creator came along with Incursion, CALDARI Achura males were quite possibly the ugliest characters in the game. So anyway, take some time on this screen to click around and view the little movies introducing each of the races. This will be your one chance to see them, and they explain the information far better than I could and in a far sexier voice. Then when you've decided, hit next and watch as your graphics card starts to load the character creator. At this point, it's not uncommon for older systems to drop down to single-digit frame rates. And that's probably the first thing you should know, is that the character creator in EVE Online is probably the most resource-intensive part of the game, and it's easily possible that it will bring, your average laptop to a crawl. I have a laptop upstairs which is from a couple of years old, had a discrete graphics card, and when I set the quality settings up to maximum, it clocks along at about 3 frames per second. And I've heard of people that basically see this and they just, decide, oh, EVE Online is just not going to work on my hardware. I'm screwed. I might as well quit the game now and never continue. Well, that would be a mistake. The rest of the game is much friendlier to hardware and will happily run on ancient laptops. It's just the character creator that's going to kill you. So if you can brave the handful of frames per second for long enough to get a character into the game, you can stop worrying about a computer melting once you get to actually flying around in spaceships. If you want to make things easier for your computer and reduce the graphics settings, then just hit the escape key and look under the graphics settings tab. There's a little section that's just for the character creator, and you can turn off things like physically simulated cloth and hair, which is basically completely pointless. Set the texture quality to low and then set the low quality characters checkbox. Now it'll warn you that low quality characters may not appear exactly as they do in the final version of the portrait. What happens is EVE will take all the character settings that you synthesize and it'll send it off to their servers, and then they'll use a fancy high-end graphics card to generate the final portrait that will be displayed in the game. Honestly, it's not something you should worry about. So before I lose my audience of people with fancy graphics card that can in fact handle the awesomeness of the EVE character creator, let's talk about the Bloodline screen. Bloodline is essentially purely an aesthetic choice. It affects the skin tone, some of the clothing options, and perhaps some of the hairstyles and other things like that. It's purely visual. The best example of this are the Minmatar, where you have 3 broad ethnic classes of the Sebestor, the Verkar, or the Brutor. Again, as you click on these, you get a little text description of their ethnic background and all that, just to give you some roleplay material. And after you've hit your bloodline option, select your gender and hit next, and then we come to the character creator proper. Assuming you're cool with the frame rate, then the character creator is a lot of fun to use. You have all the options on the right side of the screen. You can zoom in and out on the left side of the screen. You can actually create a whole body avatar, but the only person that can see you right now is yourself. But the headshots are visible to everyone in the game. Now, unlike a lot of character creators, you don't have a ton of sliders for, breadth of nose, breast size, and things like that. In this case, you actually have to go onto the model itself, and you'll see the areas highlighted in the blue mesh, and you can grab it with the left mouse button and move it around, letting you adjust the exact shape of the piece of anatomy that you're interested in. I'd advise against going all comical with your shape settings here, because that's the only thing you won't be able to change later. Almost everything else on the right side of the screen, eyes, hair, skin details, clothes, body modifications, you can change all these things later on in the game should you so desire. I like to just hit the random buttons most of the time until I see something that I like, and then maybe adjust from there. It's not too complex, really. If you do make a mistake, there's a history bar at the bottom of the screen which you can move to the left if you want to undo changes. And if you really decide the race and bloodline are just not your thing in the bottom left, you can select new choices, but that'll put you back to the start of the character creator. Okay, and so once you're done, you then come through to a screen which lets you pose your portrait and adjust the character so you can get the actual portrait looking the way you want. You know, you can move him around, make him look at different things. You can adjust the frame and zoom in and out. And really, you can also grab the corners of his mouth and make him smile. Make him look at you if you like. That's hard to tell with these eyes, of course. You can make them look all spooky, and then of course you can adjust the lighting. There's plenty of options here. But again, nice and easy. You can change all this later. You know that you've got everything. There's nothing here that you can't undo. As of now, there is only one more option that you must select, which you cannot undo, which you are going to be stuck with. So I hit next. I've got my portrait, and I've got to pick my name. And be very careful with the name, because you're going to be stuck with this forever. There is currently no option to change it. The only times they will change the name of characters is when they're considered far too offensive or racist. This is one of the places where the sandbox does break down. You cannot use a racist, sexist, homophobic name. You can't use profanity. And if your name is considered offensive, you'll get the name changed to something like Minmatar Clone 1138 or whatever. And then you'll have one option to change it. And if your one name change is, again, considered offensive, I believe that they will ban you from the game, but I can't be sure on that. So pick a good name, one that will work for you. And the only bit of advice I think I can offer here is that if you expect that you're going to be involved in PvP with fleets, you maybe don't want to have a character whose name starts with A or Z, because then you'll probably end up near one end of the list of targets and much more likely to be shot before other players in your fleet. This final screen also lets you pick your ancestry and your education. Again, this provides you with a bunch of roleplay text if that floats your boat. The other thing that this might change is if you pick your education, it'll change your starting station. And perhaps if you're joining a particular alliance, then maybe you want to be near to their particular space. But truthfully, just pick the one that is default, or the one that matches your gameplay style or whatever. For 99% of players, it does not matter. Once you're happy, hit the finalize button. And that's it. You will load into your new station and your new character, and you'll have your chance to start your career as a capsuleer in the universe of New Eden. But we'll go into that in another video.